Cheers, good morning. Great talk before from Adidas preceding this talk, because definitely a big focus of what companies are doing right now, or what they're doing, this kind of idea of digital business transformation. And my company has sort of an unfair share of focus on that, enabling our clients to kind of do that. My title today, Service Design and Product Management, Friend or Foes. A little bit catty, suggesting potential conflict, and definitely, as the introduction noted, that this is something that happens in terms of, I'm sure you all, if you play a service design role, have had conflict in different organizations you've been introduced in, and if you haven't heard about product management, you need to learn a lot more about it. So who am I? I've been with Sapient for, this is my 12th year now. I've worked in North America, I've worked in Europe, I've worked all around the globe, and I've either been in functions which are head of research, head of strategy for different groups, whether it be geographical or it be functional. Currently I essentially lead experience strategy and service design for the company, and those are really all about understanding the patterns of people, experience modeling, and leveraging those patterns of people to drive organizational change, to drive offering change, to drive process change, to basically try to map your patterns to the patterns of people, your customers. And I'm passionate about innovation, wrote a book about it over 10 years ago now. It desperately needs a refresh, but just a little bit from where I come from. Also, I love Cork. I was sitting here this morning blown away by Tim Lucy's presentation. I don't know if you're here, Tim, but if you are, really inspiring to, I'll be open and say I'm a little jaded about conferences. Now you go to conferences and you kind of get this feeling that you see a lot of things recycled over and over again. And to just see impact to citizens in governments is a really powerful thing. And I do believe service design has a unique value in that way, in kind of the connecting the front and backstage, and really caring about the process in the organization as much as it cares about the people it's serving, and that kind of transformative impact. So that was my trip to Cork a couple years ago. This is my first time in Ireland outside of Cork. So if you haven't been to Cork, go to Cork. My talk today is in 3 parts, 3 chapters. I'll give a little, very rapid kind of argument for why there's a digital business transformation imperative. A lot of what, again, my previous speakers just talked about, so I'm going to go through it in sort of a whirlwind fashion, assuming most of us in the room are probably already there. So I don't need to really do much convincing. I just have to get us all to the same place in terms of the story today. I'm then going to touch on this idea of how innovation, there's actually been a lot of innovation in how we innovate. And service design happens to be one of the kinds of approaches that are an innovation in the innovation space. And I'll talk about how every discipline is trying to do that, and how that's actually producing a convergence of disciplines and potential conflict of disciplines. And then finally, I'll tackle very specifically this idea of service design versus product management. And I've kind of already introduced the answer, the complementary roles that I see that they actually can have specifically in digital business transformation. So that's what I've got. So let's talk about the transformation imperative. There's 3 main challenges that every organization is going through today, and especially ones that are big traditional organizations with decades worth of cruft built up over time. So the first is this customer challenge. This is not something that needs to be overstated again to this group. It's already been stated, I think, 3 times in 3 presentations. So this idea of the rapidly changing expectations, and sort of thank God for Apple, the Apple effect. Sort of realize something can be so simple and easy, and you can argue whether they're simple and easy anymore, but you sort of realize this certain way of being and interacting with an organization, and then you just become to expect it everywhere. You look at sort of the father of probably the most talked about manager of our era, Jeff Bezos. And if none of you have, if you have not read his annual shareholder letter, please make a note to yourself to go and read the previous 4 years' annual shareholder letters of Amazon. You will actually see a lot of his thinking, a lot of his strategy. They're actually very clear and open about what they're doing. And this starts in every case with customer obsession and this idea that to remain a day one company, a company that fights like it's in the first day of its existence, you must be customer centered and kind of have that radical customer centricity. And the reality is that, you know, Jeff Bezos is saying it, everyone's saying it. Leaders across companies, across industries actually said in 2015, said that 89% of companies would expect to compete mostly on the basis of customer experience by 2016. They said that in 2015. So, you know, needless to say, that is already an assumption in terms of leadership in companies. Needless to say, there's also lots of research showing that expectations are higher, the brand loyalty is lower, and the return of the market of companies that are actually leading in customer experience from external folks like Forrester judging them, they actually outperform the market, and especially so versus the laggards. So there's this incredible body of data saying that people think that this matters and that in fact it does matter, yet there's also a distressing kind of concerning gap that you see where lots of people are talking about this, yet very few people are actually able to pull it off. So this is kind of our first core challenge of modern day organizations. The second is the technology challenge. And again, our opening speaker today obviously talked a lot about the blending of human and technology, and with the rise of artificial intelligence and kind of a supercomputer in all of our pockets, these issues are becoming more and more pressing for all of us every day. But this fact sort of exists that it wasn't that long ago that in big companies and organizations across the world, IT departments were being outsourced entirely. Literally, the entire function was outsourced. Now, that's anathema if you want to be radically customer-centric and you want to meet the customer challenge. You cannot move at the speed you need to move if you don't own the technology that fundamentally either enables or limits those interactions. So you just get to the point where it doesn't matter if you're a travel company, you're a technology company. It doesn't matter if you're Capital One, you're a technology company. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're a government. At some level, you're a technology organization. So getting your head wrapped around that is really critical. And if you look at all of the crazy trend lines around the adoption of technologies, I'm not going to dwell on this, but there's this massive rate of change, which people have talked about. Again, not going to dwell over it. And this amazing investment or projections in terms of the size of these markets that are new platforms, like, for example, AR and VR, which seem to be projected out a little bit further every 2 years. But it certainly looks like these are going to be more meaningfully impacting our day-to-day lives in the very near future. So again, as there will be an opportunity for new companies who use these platforms in current industries to make differences and to disrupt potential incumbents. So massive challenge, final challenge, and the hardest challenge, because I actually think you can get people to care about customers, and technology is tough, but the reality is this idea that agility starts to become the most important core competency of any organization. This enables lots of things. It enables customer-centeredness. If you can't respond quickly, as our Adidas presenters just said, without the responsiveness, you're not going to have a good product market fit. You're not going to have a good service market fit. You're always going to be a little behind. And the interesting thing about this is that it's exactly counter to what a lot of traditional organizations were building for decades. And that was repeatability and optimization. if you look at the movements, business management movements of the past, like the quality movement and driven by information technology and Six Sigma, that was all about removing waste and making it predictable. And it wasn't about evolving the organization. And in fact, it is exactly opposite of that, because you so ingrain and optimize to do one thing that then you actually don't have the ability to move on. So this is just a massive challenge for every company and organization, especially if you have legacy, if you have decades of kind of trying to optimize. When you then need to move more quickly, that is a radical challenge. So those are the kind of three grand challenges of our era. And just that by way of example, you have this idea of, idea to live, which again, thankfully the Adidas presenters noted this idea as well. You look at trying to bring something new to market, and if it takes you a year and a half to bring something to market, it might have been a great idea a year and a half ago, but today it's actually irrelevant because there's been a new introduction that has made it so. So how do you drop it to be radically lower? Amazon's exceptionally good at this. They launched Prime, which is 1-hour delivery, in 111 days. And they had, at the time that this quote was made, it reached 60% of the US population. That was in 30 months. That just is an incredible achievement for a company, regardless of who they are. So, speed kills, speed matters. It kills in terms of it drives disruption. The Fortune 500 has turned over quite significantly. I will be totally transparent and open, but half of this turnover actually has nothing to do with disruption, has everything to do with consolidation. At the same time, some companies and industries are being disrupted. Those same industries are being consolidated. So bigger companies are getting bigger. I'm sure all of you have seen that, but kind of a remarkable figure that the average life expectancy of the Fortune 500 company was 75 years in '95, and now in 2016, it's just 15 years. So this is what I'm kind of talking about. The companies are struggling to drive digital business transformation, and that's changing what customers see, the offering, simultaneously with how you deliver the offering and evolve it over time. So it's this combinatorial kind of effect that you can have where you aren't just changing it in a point of time, but you're trying to actually move to a more evergreen place as an organization, one that is constantly producing things that are desirable, feasible, and viable, and kind of embracing radical customer centricity on customers, modern tools and technologies, and also kind of this business agility, the digital nativeness that, and the culture and the process that those people follow. Chapter 2, innovation on innovation approaches. First, baseline innovation definition. Lots of people talk about innovation, they don't define it, and yet everyone's talking about a different thing. So important to always just baseline definition. Creating value for people through newer or improved products and services, or new improved services and products, or creating platforms for doing it systemically. That critical thing, it must hit the market. It's not just an invention sitting in the back room in R&D. An innovation must be creating value, be creating mutual value in the market. And we're in this era of continuous innovation, and that isn't a single thing, though. You can create services and products or platforms that are, there's kind of a distribution of what that is. There's incremental and there's more breakthrough innovation. And there are thusly different innovation problems. How to be nimble, yet optimize the business. How to transform a core business. Maybe you're radically behind in one area and it requires more than kind of the incremental optimization. How to identify that next big bet, whether it's a entirely new business that's adjacent to what you have now or not even related to it, or maybe it's a new platform to do your business that hasn't been done in your industry. And I think, again, the really exciting thing about our time it's frustrating as well, but very exciting, is there's just been this massive innovation in the space and in how we innovate. So you look at things like A/B and multivariate testing. You couldn't do that not that long ago. To be able to actually put in market live multiple options that are your offering or your service, and then to test that with real customers at some scale is just a foundationally transformative innovation in how to innovate. Similarly, other things like prototyping and how we've gotten better at that. Similarly, agile development in terms of increasing quality of software, reducing waste, service design, obviously, the lean startup, all kind of a remarkable body of investment in how to create new things and do it repeatably that are valuable to people, value to the organizations that are creating them, and our innovations. But again, I think that too often people sort of come to the table with the approach that's their discipline. And I would challenge anyone here who comes to the table as, I'm a service designer, or I am a product manager, or I am a whatever you kind of title yourself. Your approach is one of many approaches that can create value in the world. And our approaches aren't always fit for purpose for the challenge that we're tackling. And recognition of the value of different disciplines and these different approaches is a really powerful thing. And so a perspective that I would share is that different innovation problems require these different approaches. And so what does that look like? So if we were to look at different approaches on a scale of incremental to breakthrough, oh, by the way, incremental is not negative and breakthrough is not positive necessarily. These are all radically valuable kinds of approaches that you can have. On one side, you have modern product management, digital product management, with an intent which is rapidly evolving offerings. And I'm going to get into more details around what modern product management is for those of you who don't know it. But it's an obsessively incremental approach, an aggressively incremental approach. I actually think that modern product management is the most appropriate organizational design of our era. Like, it is, every organization like Adidas should be moving in the direction of adopting. It might be journey-based, it might be product-based, touch-point-based. It can be the focus of the team, the self-organizing team can be different, but the actual organizational design and all of the intent of it is the most important organizational model of our current, for sure. Service design, I think, is much more about reimagining offerings, and oftentimes are across touch point or even across journey. And so, I know that sounds sort of weird, service design across journey. You're like, what do you mean? It's journey. but this kind of idea of being willing to let go of assumptions and really make bigger leaps is something that's very valuable for service design. But it's still less breakthrough than, for example, if you're trying to do new product, really trying to validate a new opportunity in a fundamentally net new business area that you've never considered. There are approaches that are better to apply to that, actually. And then you might use service design to scale them, and then you might use digital product management to manage them. So you see, they all provide value, but they just have a different intent. And then lean startup as the last reference here. If you get to the point in an organization where you see an opportunity that is too important to ignore, but you look at your own culture, process, and organization, you're like, we're never going to be able to do this. We're never going to pull this off. A viable and justifiable option is to spin a company out to try to go tackle that opportunity. So O2 in the UK, for example, don't know how many people know O2, but they spun out GIFGAF, which is a company that's totally user driven in terms of its marketing and its customer service. I think all of GIFGAF has like 15 people or something that works for it. And it's a telecom. It's kind of crazy to imagine that. Obviously, they don't own their own towers and all of that. That's all O2. But the idea of spinning something out that could ultimately one day eat your lunch is a valuable and interesting idea. Actually, GM did that with Saturn many years ago, if you want to read those cases. And Saturn was actually doing it. And so GM didn't like that, and then they changed how Saturn operated to be less good, and then Saturn failed. So it actually is a relevant idea, but it is hard to do. So chapter 3 is going to basically kind of dive down into these two areas as the point of the kind of the potential conflict or complement. That is the topic of the presentation. You know, on either side, we have sort of representatives, leading representatives of product management and service design. You know, Martin Erickson, great guy, one of the leaders of Mind the Product. He also wrote the book, I'm forgetting the name of it, Product Roadmaps. Anyone remember Martin's book? I have it at home sitting on my desk, but I can't remember it, sadly. But product management is more important than ever, precisely because new innovations intersect business, technology, and design. Again, kind of the idea of, I would replace design for people and sort of the understanding of people, and that actually maps really well up to the kind of transformation model that I introduced at the front, changing the what and the how kind of simultaneously. And so yeah, everyone in business is talking about agile. Not this episode, not this issue, but the previous issue of Harvard Business Review, which is over the world over still one of the most read business publications. Literally, the front of the cover was agile at scale in letters that are as big. It was literally the only thing on the page, and it is all about kind of modern product management. I think Alberta is actually here. Oh, is she talking right now?
Not right now, I think tomorrow.
Okay, well, Alberta, if you are here, hello. I would like to meet you. Alberta did a great interview this year, or maybe late last year, where she said, kind of more simply, service design will take over the world. So, you know, I like, the intent was the same. It's more important than it's ever been, as kind of Martin was with product management. And Alberta leads a group at Lloyd's that very well may be the largest group of service designers in the private sector and in the world, potentially. Lloyd's is embracing the ideas of digital business transformation and service design at a scale that few companies or organizations ever have. The investments they're making are radically high, and they're having really amazing outcomes. So you start to look at these two things and you say, okay, what are they? What are the benefits that they kind of purport? And you look at product management and service design. Both are talking about, hey, we think we can work agilely. Another one, we think we're customer-centered. They both bring different perspectives together and form interdisciplinary teams. They both suggest that prototyping and kind of an iterative kind of development process is the way to win. Both are very intended to be outcome-driven, not always in practice, but certainly in terms of benefit, promise, benefit, and potential. So that could possibly mean, this is where it gets a little catty, there could be some conflict potentially. It actually says 6 minutes here. I'm totally on it. There could be some conflict. So let's unpack what they are. A too brief primer on product management. Who here, raise your hand if you feel like you have a good handle on what modern product management is. Very few. You guys need to get way more up to speed on this. This is really critical because it is the way that more organizations are going to be built. And it's a value-focused approach, and the basic principles around it are you move from a focus of time, cost, and scope, this fixed time, fixed price, fixed idea. We're going to figure out everything up front, and then we're going to promise that 18 months will be someplace. And it's really moving to a much more agile way of working where you're focused on flow, the amount of change, the quality of that change, and the value that it creates for customers and for business. And that's kind of principally what it is. And more specifically what it is you basically carve the estate or offerings. It might be touch points, could be journeys, depends on industry, depends on the organization. You carve it into products, quote unquote products. Each product gets an owner, sort of a CEO, mini CEO. Each product gets a dedicated full stack team. So the team complements design, it has business thinking, it has technology thinking, kind of all together. And can work independently. Those products get a goal, and ultimately the product is always changing to maximize progress, product market fit, and business performance. That's essentially product management, as well as the kind of the principal value change that I talked about before. So what's service design? Obviously a too brief primer, but you're at a service design conference, so that doesn't matter. If you don't know about it now, you're gonna certainly know about it more soon. It's value focused, it's enabling what I think is actually, organizations can do what seems almost impossible. You can actually drive customer relevance up, and you can drive cost to serve down. You can simplify the organization while actually providing more for customers. What a cool thing, it's like magic. And for service design, that actually does service design, where you are really interrogating the internal process and you're simplifying that. That's an incredible value, and we see when our clients are really committed to that, they can have this kind of incredible combination in terms of an effect. So what is service design? Again, really simple idea here. You're basically taking a front stage, all the touch points, offerings that an organization might have, and then you're taking the backstage, the operating model, all the core process, compliance and policy, pricing, all of that stuff, and you are essentially looking at it in combination across and orchestrating that across an enterprise end-to-end and across employee and customer touch points. So again, far too brief. But now the important thing, how are they different? So product management is about being obsessively evolutionary. You could tweak a tiny, you could do center justification or left justification of a dialog box. And you would test that and say, what's gonna win, right? It needs to really sweat the details, and it really needs to be about it can also do bigger changes, but it needs to sweat the details too. Service design is much more about entertaining a sort of a wholesale reimagination. Independent teams, hey, we're a little mini company with a mini CEO. The service design must be cross-enterprise. You must look across the enterprise to address some of the the gaps that you see when you actually do blueprinting. It's typically touch point focused versus journey focused. It's leaner, not that it's not collaborative, but it's focused on lean teams. And service design, I've invented a word here, it's collaborative. It requires collaboration from a much larger group in the organization. One is growth and profit driven, one is more relevance and efficiency driven. One is more, I would describe as agility in business as usual versus agility in transformation. And that's kind of the difference. So, perhaps Martin and Alberta might actually be, star-crossed lovers that just have yet to see, they probably know each other, so that's the funniest thing about this slide. Might actually be the perfect match. And so this is what I believe is reality, is that product management and service design work really well together in the context of digital business transformation. So what does that mean more in terms of practice? This is a completely non-scientific characterization of different approaches and how they create value over time. Don't cite this, don't take a picture of this. This is just something I scribbled around with to try to get an idea across. So waterfall, everyone knows this idea of the Big Bang. You work for a long time and then you launch it and you hope it creates value, but you don't really know, right? And sometimes it doesn't. In fact, it destroys a lot of value a lot of the time. Digital product management, you have a much better handle of incremental value creation. And like I said, I think it should be the dominant way that we organize in organizations around the world. But it's still obsessively evolutionary. And I do think that service design plus product management gives you an opportunity to have this sort of measured revolution where you're obsessively evolving in different places, but then you're able to take steps up as you introduce service design. And my last, and you have a blueprint, so you have, obviously your journey architecture and your journey, the outside-in view, and then you introduce your blueprint, which is all the kind of process and policy and the things that are happening to enable or limit. And then you're flowing that into a mixed backlog in Jira or whatever your development kind of source of truth is, and then product teams can go ahead and do that. And we've seen amazing impact of this in organizations we've worked with. 75% end-to-end onboarding time for a small business client, 22 days to 1 day pension processing time improvement. On the customer side, these are just undeniable wins, and then incredible efficiency wins as well. My final slide, again, this idea that people tend to think about what they do, and it's like, this is how we do it, that you are what you eat, right? But the thing is that if you're gonna really embrace the diversity of different perspectives, you have to embrace the reality that these approaches, how might they work together? So you might have a transformation strategy that says, hey, here are the different pools of value, the journeys, products that we want to go reimagine or create from scratch. We might explore those if they're net new. On the top, if we're going to do core business reinvention, this combination of service design being the front end of standing up a product team or the front end of a reimagination of a current product is very powerful. But it's not something that's sort of business as usual. It is kind of a agitative kind of force in a great way, but it is an agitative force. And you need to have strategic enablement for this stuff to work. Technology needs to be in APIs. You need to have good DevOps tool chains. You need to have organizational change management. You need kind of all of these to come together to ultimately produce the effect that you're looking for. I'm about 1 minute over time. Thanks.